All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, we're going behind the scenes to explore the world of constraint rules in software. You know, like when you're online configuring something and the website kind of knows what options actually make sense together.
Yeah.
Well, that's constraint rules working their magic.
Exactly.
We've got this document, constraintrules.pdf, that's going to help us break it all down. So whether you're a developer or just curious about how software thinks,
Right.
this is going to be fascinating, I think.
Oh, absolutely. It really is, because it's not just about preventing errors. It's about creating a smooth experience.
Yeah.
You know, a really enjoyable user experience. Kind of like if you're building a house, you need blueprints to make sure everything fits together.
Yeah.
So constraint rules are like the blueprints of the digital world.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's build that foundation.
Okay.
What exactly are constraint rules?
Imagine you're at a fancy restaurant. You're ordering a multi-course meal. You wouldn't expect to get offered like a milkshake after the lobster bisque, right?
No.
Constraint rules, they work in a similar way. They're like these digital gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers, okay.
Making sure users are only selecting compatible options when they're configuring something, like a product or a service, online. No milkshakes after the bisque.
So there's like this invisible hand guiding users through that whole process, making sure everything makes sense.
Exactly.
And preventing those like frustrating dead ends where you're like, wait, I can't do that.
Yeah, precisely. And what's even cooler is they can be used to drive sales, you know?
Oh,
Even personalize that user experience. Like, imagine you're buying a new phone online.
Okay.
And based on what you've already chosen, a constraint rule could, say, suggest a premium case or an extended warranty.
Oh, so smart.
That fits your needs and what you seem to want.
Okay, so now I'm seeing how they can go beyond just preventing errors.
Yes.
They can actually enhance the experience and, like you said, even influence decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
So now I'm dying to know, how do they actually work
Right.
behind the scenes?
At their core, it's all about conditional logic, which is basically if-then statements.
Oh,
It's a simple idea. If this happens, then this is what should happen.
okay.
Like in our document, there is an example about a car lease configurator. If the buyer chooses, say, an SUV lease and sets their expense limit to $500,
Got it.
they can't also select the luxury vehicle option.
Right, makes sense. Exceeds their budget.
Exactly, because that would blow their budget.
But software can get pretty complex. Are all constraint rules that straightforward?
Well, not always. We can actually layer these rules, creating this kind of hierarchy based on how the product is structured and how many inputs are involved.
Interesting.
It's like a decision tree, where each choice leads to new possibilities. And the constraint rules are there at every branch, guiding the user along.
So it's like a chain reaction of logic.
Yes.
Each choice triggers these new constraints and possibilities.
Yeah.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Exactly. And this layering, it allows for really nuanced and responsive systems. Like, imagine you're building a computer online,
Okay, yeah.
choosing, say, a high-end graphics card.
Mm-hmm.
That could trigger additional constraints for, like, the power supply, the cooling system, even the case size, making sure all those components can actually work together.
So smart. It's like the software's thinking several steps ahead.
Yeah, anticipating those conflicts and guiding the user towards a configuration that really makes sense.
Awesome. But how do administrators, the ones who actually set up these rules, manage all that complexity?
Well, they've got a pretty powerful toolkit.
Okay.
And one of the cool things is this ability to override how constrained values are actually displayed to users.
Oh, what do you mean?
So instead of just blocking an option completely,
Okay.
they could, say, disable it or remove it entirely.
Okay.
Or even display a message explaining why it's not available.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
It gives them control over the experience and lets them tailor the feedback they're giving.
Right. Based on the context. Okay, they're
Wow.
essentially the architects of the user's journey.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The level of control they have is pretty amazing.
This is all so fascinating. But before we get too carried away, what about AJX constraint rules? I know AJX is like a web development thing,
Right.
but how does it affect this whole constraint rule process?
AJX is all about speed and responsiveness.
Okay.
It lets those constraint rules be evaluated instantly without having to, like, manually refresh the page.
Oh, wow.
Imagine you're configuring a product and the available options change right there as you're making your selections.
Oh, yeah.
It's like having a conversation with the software.
Okay, so it adds a layer of interactivity, makes the whole process feel way smoother and intuitive. But are there any downsides to using AJAX?
Well, one thing to consider is performance.
Oh, yeah.
If the rules get really complex or need a lot of data processing, it could slow things down. It's a bit of a balancing act between that responsiveness and how efficiently things are running. But even with AJX, those core if-then rules, those are still the foundation of everything.
Okay, got it. So AJX supercharges the user experience,
Yeah,
but administrators need to be mindful of those potential performance trade-offs,
precisely.
which leads us to another really interesting part, the end user experience.
Mm-hmm.
How does all this actually feel for the person using the software?
Right. Well, with AJX constraint rules, the user gets instant feedback. So it feels really responsive, really intuitive.
Yeah,
Like the system's kind of anticipating their next move, guiding them to, a valid configuration.
that's awesome. It really sounds like it elevates that whole experience.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about how administrators actually craft these rules.
Okay.
What's their process like?
Well, it's a really interesting mix of technical expertise and user psychology.
Yeah.
They need to think like a programmer and like the end user
Right.
to make rules that are both, logically sound and user-friendly.
So it's not just about writing code, it's about anticipating how people will actually behave.
Right.
And making the whole experience feel natural.
Exactly. For example, remember those different types of conditions we talked about? Always true.
Yeah.
Simple conditions and advanced conditions.
Always true. Seems pretty straightforward. But what about the other two?
Okay, so simple conditions, they're like basic checks.
Right.
Like, imagine you're buying a plane ticket.
Okay.
You select one way, and the return date field just disappears.
Yeah.
That's a simple condition in action.
Okay, got it. So one rule,
Right.
clear cause and effect.
Yeah.
But what about those advanced conditions? What makes them so advanced?
Think of them as like intricate webs of logic. They can evaluate multiple things,
Okay.
even pull in data from outside sources. Like, say you're applying for a loan online.
Okay.
An advanced condition could look at your credit score, your income, even current interest rates to decide if you're eligible and what your terms would be.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's actually crunching numbers, making these complex decisions.
Exactly. And that's what lets constraint rules create those really personalized and dynamic experiences.
This all ties back to that override constrained value display thing we talked about, right?
Yeah. It gives administrators so much control over how they present things to users.
Yeah.
They can completely hide an option,
Okay.
disable it, or just show a warning message about why it's not available.
Right.
They can fine-tune the whole experience.
Yeah, and provide that right level of guidance.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how it all works together.
Yeah.
It's like they're the puppeteers,
Yes.
carefully orchestrating that user journey.
Mm-hmm.
They have so much power to shape it.
That's true. And that brings up a really important point, testing and refinement. Even with the best rules, it's so important to track how people are actually using the system,
Yeah.
get feedback, and make changes if you need to.
It's like any design process. You start with a plan, but then you got to iterate and refine based on, what actually happens.
Exactly. And that's where AJX constraint rules get even more interesting. Because they work in real time, administrators can see the impact of their changes, like instantly.
Oh, wow.
It's this constant feedback loop. They can continuously tweak and optimize everything.
So it's not just about speed. It's about being able to adapt quickly to user behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
But with all this talk about dynamism and responsiveness, are there any, potential downsides to AJX constraint rules?
Well, like any technology, there are trade-offs. One big one is performance. If those rules are too complex
Yeah.
or involve a ton of data processing, it can really strain the system and cause slowdowns.
It's about balancing that super responsive experience
Right.
with making sure the whole system stays fast and efficient.
Exactly. Administrators need to really think about those performance impacts and optimize their rules carefully.
Makes sense. Finding that sweet spot between power and performance. Now, I can't help but wonder about the future of all this. Where do you see this technology going?
Ooh, that's a great question. As AI and machine learning keep advancing, I think we'll see constraint rules get even smarter, even more personalized.
Oh, wow. What would that even look like?
Imagine software that doesn't just prevent errors, but also anticipates what you need
Yeah.
and guides you towards the best outcome based on your preferences and how you've used it before.
Amazing. But how would that actually work?
So imagine you're booking a flight online.
Oh, yeah.
An AI-powered constraint rule could look at your past trips, your preferences, even what's going on in the world,
Wow.
to suggest the most convenient flights, hotels you'd like, even warn you about potential travel
It's
problems.
like having a personal travel agent, but built right in.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real power is, creating those intelligent and personalized experiences that go way beyond just error prevention.
This is all so fascinating. I can already see all the possibilities. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Right.
Let's go back to those notes and considerations from the document.
Okay.
Feels like there's some key takeaways we should highlight.
Yeah, you're right. The document really stresses the importance of planning and implementation.
Yeah.
It talks about potential problems administrators need to watch out for, like performance issues or unintended consequences.
So it's a reminder that even with the best intentions, things can still go wrong.
Yeah.
And that brings up the whole role of administrators in this.
Oh, absolutely. They're like the unsung heroes. They're the ones behind the scenes making sure everything runs smoothly.
They're like the stage managers of the internet,
Hmm.
making sure the show goes on. But it's not always easy, is it?
No, not at all. They're constantly balancing user needs, technical limitations, and the goals of the business.
So it's more than just code. It's about understanding how people behave,
Yeah.
spotting potential problems,
Yeah.
and adapting as technology changes.
Exactly. And that brings us back to testing and refinement.
Right. It's not enough to set up the rules and walk away.
Right.
You have to keep an eye on how people are using it, get feedback, and make changes as you go.
Precisely. It's all about continuous improvement.
And with AJX constraint rules, that feedback loop gets even tighter, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because AJX happens in real time, those administrators can see what happens when they change things almost immediately.
Wow.
It's like having a live conversation with the system so they can fine-tune the experience as they go.
That's incredible. It really empowers them to create those dynamic, responsive systems.
Yeah, for sure.
But with all this talk about technical stuff, I think it's important to step back and remember the human element.
Yeah, I totally agree. At the end of the day, it's about making things better for the people actually using it,
Yeah,
making software more intuitive, more helpful, and more enjoyable.
exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
It really is.
It's that intersection of technology, psychology, design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It's understanding how people think and behave
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to build systems that feel natural and effortless to use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much goes into something that, we don't even really think about as users. Constraint rules are a perfect example of that hidden complexity, right?
It's true. We just click, choose, get what we want, and we rarely think about the logic behind it. But it's a testament to good design when it works so well, that we don't even notice it.
Exactly. It's like a well-choreographed dance.
Yeah.
Everything's smooth, effortless, and you're caught up in the performance,
Yeah,
not necessarily the steps that make it all happen.
I love that. And speaking of choreography, we talked about how administrators craft these rules, but what about the tools they actually use? Like, what's their workspace look like?
Well, it depends on the software, but they usually have this visual interface
Okay.
where they can set up the conditions, actions, messages, all in a way that makes sense.
Kind of like a flow chart where they map out different paths and then add the rules for each step.
So it's visual design meets logical thinking.
Yeah.
They're building the digital version of those choose-your-own-adventure books, right? Each choice leads you somewhere new,
Right.
and the constraint rules are there to make sure the story hangs together.
Exactly. And just like a good author, they need to think creatively, anticipate those different paths, and make rules that are logical but also keep the user engaged.
It really is this mix of technical skill and storytelling.
Mm.
Now, I'm curious about your thoughts on the future of this. We touched on AI and machine learning, but where do you see constraint rules going, like in the next few years?
Oh, I think we're just getting started. As AI gets more sophisticated, these rules could get even more predictive, even more personalized. Imagine systems that don't just stop you from making mistakes, but actually know what you need and guide you to the best outcome, based on what you like and how you've used things before.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's like having a personal assistant for everything you do online, helping you make smart decisions.
So cool.
And this could change so many things, from shopping online to healthcare, education. The possibilities are huge.
Okay, I'm excited about the future now, but
Yeah.
before we wrap up, is there anything else from the document or our chat that's important for our listeners to keep in mind?
I think the biggest takeaway is that constraint rules aren't just some technical detail.
Yeah,
They're a fundamental part of making a good user experience. They help us navigate this digital world easily, confidently, and, even have some fun along the way.
well said. It really shows how even in software, there's this human element. Whether it's the people creating the rules or the people using them, we're all part of this big system.
Absolutely. And as tech keeps changing, it's so important to remember that it should always be about people, about making their lives better.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into constraint rules. We've gone from the basics to how they're built, how they impact us, and even what the future holds.
It's been a fun ride.
I think we all have a better understanding now of what goes on behind the scenes. So next time you're online, smoothly configuring a product or browsing a website, take a second to appreciate that hidden logic making it all possible.
And remember, there are brilliant people constantly working on these systems, making our digital lives easier and more enjoyable.
Well said. Until next time, happy diving.